Good morning and welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Friday, the 17th day of Elul. That means this Shabbos we're getting ready for a very special Shabbos, Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul, which is the day, birthday of the two giants, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya that we study every single day. And actually, the lesson that we learn today is connected somewhat with the concept of what the Alter Rebbe is all about. And he established the movement of Chabad, which means Chochmah Bina Das, understanding, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, using our intellect to be able to serve Hashem properly. So let's begin the lesson today. And again, the reminder, we say the three extra chapters of the month of Elul. Today is chapters 49, 50, and 51. Let's begin with Tzedakah, Gedola, Tzedakah, Shemekareves, Esageula. So we are in the middle of chapter 15 in the Igeret Hakodesh. We explained yesterday, gave an overview of the 7 emotive attributes, which are basically 6 emotive attributes, and number 7 is the actual action, Malchus. And we explained how we understand how this develops in the person. One thing leads to another. There is the attribute of giving, attribute of restricting. Then when it comes to action, there is also, we need further emotions to be able to get ourselves to do what we want, what we understand that we want to do, whether it is love, whether it is restriction. And here today the Alter Rebbe continues to explain that there is the external attributes, external emotions, and there is the internal emotions. It's a kind of the engine that makes the emotion work. For example, talking about kindness. The person is kind. He wants to give. What drives him? There is an internal emotion, which is the emotion of love. When you love someone, you want to give. When you're afraid of something, you will restrict, even if it's in a positive form. So there is the inner emotions, the inner attributes, and the external attributes. And Alter Rebbe continues to explain that all of this, the internal and the external attributes, they all derive from the intellect. The Chachma, the Bina, and the Das. Chachma is the wisdom, the idea that enters your mind. The Bina is the understanding, the processing of the idea. Then there is the Das. Das is then called knowledge. It's more connecting, the connection, the person feeling. It's not a feeling, but it's a conviction that you have after the understanding what is the right thing to do. Empathy, to empathize with something. You can sometimes read something and understand it, but there is no ability of empathizing. This is called the Das. And this is something that develops as the person gets older, gets mature. That's why a child, he gets excited from small things because his intellect is not developed yet. So he gets excited. He has a very powerful emotions, but it's based on his level of intellect. And the bottom line is that the way we focus on our intellect and develop our intellect, we're able to manipulate and work our emotions that they should be in the right way to serve Hashem, to love and fear of Hashem. So let's see inside what the Alter Rebbe says. Says the Alter Rebbe, V'hinei, midas elu in b'chinas chitzonius shebanefesh. Says, now these emotive attributes, those involved in imparting enlightenment, and the like. They are the external aspect of the soul. So these emotions are external aspect of the soul. Within them are vested the inner attributes, which bring about the external attributes involved in the actual imparting of knowledge. Now, what is the inner attributes? As we said, this is the engine that runs, that makes it work, that makes the kindness work, is the inner attributes. For example, Shem Bechinos Ahava V'yira, the faculties of love and awe, and so on. Chulu. I know, the Alter Rebbe now brings the example that we used yesterday. When a father teaches a child, we spoke about the different attributes, what is the process from the father's intellect all the way to giving over to the child what it takes. And it's an interesting concept. You can go back to yesterday's lesson to listen to it, to understand this. So he says, this may be compared to the case of a father who bestows enlightenment upon his son because of his love for him. So the more love you have, the more the child is able to receive the enlightenment, the intellect. The internal aspect of the attribute involved is love. And its external aspect is kindness. So the love drives the kindness, and that is how he gives over his thoughts, his ideas. And he withholds his influence because of his dread and fear, lest his son come to some downfall, heaven forbid. So the father's fear and dread are thus the internal aspect of his gevura, the attribute of restriction. This is the attribute that completely or partially withholds the flow of instruction. The remaining emotive attributes are all offshoots of love and fear, as explained in part 1, chapter 3 above. And accordingly, they too possess internal and external aspects. Now the Alter Rebbe continues and explains that the source, the root of these both internal and external aspects of the emotive attributes, they all derive from the intellect. The source and root of these internal and external emotive attributes is the Chabad, an acronym of the intellectual faculties, the Chachma, Bina, Das of one's soul. And why is that? Because that's the way the emotions work. The intellect creates the emotions. For a person's emotive traits are in proportion to his intellect. As we see a child gets emotional, gets excited from small things. This is empirically evident with a child, for example, whose Chabad are in a state of pettiness. The intellect is petty things. All his emotive traits too relate to insignificant things. And as he matures in age and understanding, his emotive traits correspondingly aspire to worthier goals. And the same thing is also with adults. You have adults that their life is football. They have adults that their life is whatever they're interested in. Not taking away from those things, it's very nice. But the more you develop your understanding of what is important in life, that develops the person's emotions, emotive attributes, and what he's drawn to. With adults too, the emotive traits develop in proportion to the intellect. For, as it says in the verse, according to his intelligence is a man praised. Now, when we're saying the man is praised according to the intelligence, in Hebrew, there are different terms to use for a man, human being. There is Adam, Ish, Gever, and Enosh, 4 different terms. Adam refers to the intellectual part of the person. Ish refers more to the emotive part of the person. So if we're talking about the developments of the intellect, why do we mention that the Ish, which is the emotive part of the person, is praised according to his intellect? But based on what we just said, that makes sense. That the emotions is based on your intellect. The greater your development of the intellect, the more in a higher level your emotions reach. That's what Alter Rebbe continues. For the extent of his love and kindness correspond to the extent of his wisdom. And all his other internal and external traits, likewise, have their source in Chabad, in the intellect. And now the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that within the intellect, which is the most important part of the intellect that affects the emotions, that affects our being, that is the Das, not so much the Chochma Bina. Chochma Bina is the understanding, the developing, the processing of the idea. The Das is the connecting to the idea. You can have a child that is a brilliant child, understands he can make in math a 5-year-old child that knows math like a 15-year-old. But it's still the Das is not developed. The connecting, he can still get upset of small petty things because the Das is there, is not developed. So that is the main part of the intellect that affects the emotions. Continues the Alter Rebbe. Most important to the development of the spiritual emotions is one's Das, which derives from one's Chachma and Bina. This is readily observable, for the differences between the emotive traits of various people corresponds to the differences in their respective degree of Das. This is the end of today's shir, and Mir Hashem, tomorrow we're going to continue the shir about how all of this is with regards to the spiritual soul. So wishing you all a good Shabbos, Aksiva, V'chasim Tova. All the best.